Good evening and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me at Race HQ, otherwise known as Craig's Man Cave. It's a small space, but it's filled with the things I love the most, like motorcycles, and frankly, everything in here smells a bit like petrol. So for me, it's a very happy place, and I'm glad to welcome you here tonight for the preview of round 2 of the Toyota grcup Media Challenge. Let's quickly review for a second. Round 1 at Killarney was intense. I learned so much on the day about driving, about the race car, about just how much adrenaline a body can produce in a 15-minute heat. But there's no time to reflect on my mistakes and even savor those moments where I wasn't completely terrible, because round 2 is upon us and we're going to Red Star, a racetrack I've never driven before. Before we preview Red Star, I thought it might be helpful just to review a couple of the things that I think are important in delivering a fast lap time. Some theoretical principles that we can maybe deploy at the track. I then thought it'd be interesting to see how those principles applied to my race at Killarney and see if any of them hold true. And we're going to support that with a little bit of footage. And then finally, we'll actually take a look at Red Star Raceway and see what of this theory I can bring to bear and hopefully get on the pace quickly, hit the ground running, and be competitive. Let's get into it. So, what actually makes a fast lap time? Is it bravery on the brakes, aggressiveness on the throttle, hope, prayer? I've tried pretty much every approach. I'm going to discuss 2 very important principles that I think have a big impact. Of course, there are many tactics, but I think these 2 are the real sources of quick lap time, at least when you're approaching a track you don't know too well. The first point is I think it's very important for a race car driver to be a great resource manager. Now, I bet you didn't think I was going to say that, but hear me out, because it's pretty important. You see, I think you've got 3 resources at your disposal if you're trying to deploy that ultimate lap. They are power, the ability to accelerate the car up to speed without spinning wheels. They are lateral grip, the ability of the car to hang on to a line before you break traction and lose that precious lap time. And they are stopping power, the ability to haul all that bulk and speed down as quickly and efficiently as possible. And it's really important as a driver that you know when and where to deploy each one of these. Now, coincidentally, all 3 of these things manifest themselves on the racetrack through a tire. It's actually a tiny little contact patch of, in our case, admittedly very good Dunlop rubber that has to execute all of this. But it's not limitless, and you need to manage the way in which you use these resources so as not to overpower the tire. And so I'm going to speak to you about the circle of life. I'm kidding. I'm going to talk to you about the circle of grip, but in racing terms, grip is life. So here comes a diagram. I know, it's very sciencey and a bit boring, but pay attention, because there will be a test.
To help us understand how to manage our resources effectively, it's worth looking at the circle of grip. This circle represents the total grip available to you from any given tire. Think of the circle or the round boundary as the limit of adhesion. Anything outside of that round boundary and you are going to lose control of the car. Anything within it and you can still make changes to the car's attitude. So there are 3 main elements at play here. We've got acceleration, we've got braking, and we've got lateral grip or cornering grip. I want to give you an idea of the perfect window in which a tire can operate. So we're going to make an assumption that we're going down the straightaway, but we're coming up to a fairly heavy braking area for a left-hand turn. So we're going to be turning off in this direction. That's the corner profile that we're coming up to. Once we get to the right braking zone, we're going to hit the brakes very hard and very much in a straight line. And that is going to exert a force, dragging rearwards on the tire right over here. And we're going to take it all the way to the maximum braking point. Now, most modern cars are fitted with ABS, so you don't actually exceed this point here, because ABS will intervene and keep you within the circle of grip. So all is good. We're working within the circle of grip. The car's getting maximum stopping power. But remember, we're approaching this corner here, and now we start to turn in. If I simply turn in whilst fully on the brakes, we're going to exert a force to the right of the car. Remember, we are turning left, and obviously we want as much traction as we can, so we're going to ask as much of the tire as we can possibly do in this circumstance. The problem is these two forces are additive, so they have a direct impact on one another. And if we're braking at this level over here, trying to use all the force available to us to stop the car, but we're cornering at the same time, we're going to end up in an area that is well outside the available circle of grip. So we're going to exceed grip, and this is where we're going to lose control of the vehicle. Of course, these conditions work equally well for acceleration. So we're still now further around the corner and we're in this area and we want to go for acceleration, but we want to accelerate as hard as possible. We're hard on the gas, but remember, we're still cornering hard. We're still using as much of this cornering lateral grip as we can, and if we simply go to full throttle, what you're going to do is just overpower the tire by trying to use maximum grip as well. And again, you're going to see we're going to fall outside of the corner. So in this example, if we're still requiring a lot of the car, if we still have a lot of turn on the car and we need to complete our corner, and let's say we're using about 70% here of the car's capability for cornering, that means that I can use no more than say 30% of the car's ability to accelerate. Now if I were to draw lines, remember we had 70% of turn and we've got roughly 30% of acceleration, we're still within our circle of grip. And the car will do this. It'll do what I'm asking it to do. If we increase any one of these forces, it's going to take that outside the circle of grip again. So you have to very efficiently manage your requests to the car. You can't ask it to do what the tire is not capable of delivering.
Thank you for toughing out the theory part of the lesson. Now that we understand what a tire can do through the circle of grip and how to deploy our resources, to me the second most important thing about a quick lap time is, in fact, ridiculously simple. All we have to do is make the straights longer and the corners shorter. So all we need is a couple of front end loaders, some civil engineers. Obviously we can't do that. I mean, a track's a track. You're stuck with what you got. But the truth is, you can change the geography of a track simply by choosing the lines you drive and using the space between track edge and track edge. I'm going to talk to you now about the value of a late apex, particularly onto a long straight, versus an early apex. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a diagram. And if you think the quality of the last diagram I used was poor, this one's going to make you think it was a Hollywood production.
Let's just set up the example here. We're on a racetrack traveling down a straight, about to hit a 90-degree left-hand corner onto another straight. And we really want to maximize that exit. So we're going to be traveling in this direction, and our goal is to get the car transitioned and exit in this direction, but with the maximum acceleration possible. An example of the early apex, what is happening is that we are having to get off the brakes quite early. And the reason we're having to get off the brakes quite early now to make our turn is because we're starting to pinch that corner off and we're asking the car to turn. Therefore, I can't use all my tires' stopping capability to slow the car down. So in this example, we start turning in early, we had to be off the brakes relatively early, and we're going for the apex. Now, in fact, this can be quicker. We've saved a bit of distance on the track. You also don't have to brake quite so hard once you get off. You can coast into the corner a little bit more. But remember, our priority is the exit. And the trouble with the early apex is that round about here, you can see that we're still asking the car's tires to do a lot of work. We're trying to accelerate, but they still have a lot of turning to do, and you will often run out of track or be tight on track exit with an early turn in. And that's bad because it delays the amount of time you have to wait until you can get back on the power. So in this example, we are only really getting back to full power around about here. That means we've coasted for a long time and we've been asking the car to do a lot of other things other than accelerate for that time. Let's compare that now to a late apex example. So in a late apex, we can brake much later and harder for longer. And this is simply because we're braking here in a straight line. We're not asking the wheels or the tires to do anything other than stop the car. That means we've got more room to play with. The tricky part of this line, though, is when we get here. And that's simply because you've now got to put quite a big turn on the car. That does mean we have to get off the brakes, blend out of the brakes over here, the more cornering we ask the car to do. That means over here you're actually slower than you would have been on the early apex. But the huge benefit is your track exit. This is now taking you very close to the apex very late in the corner, meaning that we can now go to full throttle round about here, sometimes even before you get to the apex of the corner, and you essentially exit in a straight line without any turn on the wheels. This means you've got a lot more acceleration available to you for a lot longer. So, just to compare that with the early turn in example, we were only able to get to the power here. That means we've gained a whole bunch of meters in which we are accelerating the car. The car on the late apex is on the power here, the early apex is here. We've gained plenty of meters to deploy full power because we're not concerned with turning. So we have in fact lengthened our straight. But it's not just there, you've done it on braking too. So remember, we're turning in on the early apex here, but we're turning in here on the late apex. We've lengthened that straight too. Granted, we've got a little bit more work to do in the middle of the corner, and that costs you a little time, but it is less time than you have gained A on the brakes and B on acceleration. And this is why we try to maximize exit as opposed to entry. It's the secret to a quick lap time. This certainly doesn't work for every corner. It particularly doesn't work for complex corners, corners that follow one after the other. In those examples, you really have to just prioritize the final corner of the complex, because that's going to count more going on to the back straight or the next straight.
Well, that's all just a bunch of theory, right? Let me prove it to you. Have a look at this bit of footage from Killarney that conclusively proves just how effective the late apex can be.
Here's a great example of how late apex and early on the throttle can help save you lap time. Two cars in front of me are involved in a heavy battle. It's the last lap. I'm desperately trying to get close to them. Both cars ahead go defensive and adopt an early apex. I'm going to push on a little further into the corner, turn back from a little later, and try to apex very late in the corner. The whole idea is to get on the power really early and be able to do that because I'm now unwinding lock and giving the front tires more opportunity for traction. That little bump you're about to see from the car in front is him actually hitting the apex, and take note of where he hits it. You're going to see a little bump from my car now. This is me hitting the apex, and you will see that it's a lot further around the corner than the car in front of me was. You can clearly see just how much closer I am to the car in front now due to that better exit because of the late apex. Now there's a lot that went on in this clip, so I'm going to play it for you one more time without the voiceover. Pay particular attention to when I pick up the throttle in the corner though. You'll see just how early it is.
You know, if only there was a way I could show you how we're going to prepare for Red Star based on what we now know. Oh wait, we can use a diagram. People, this one is rock bottom clip art. But pay attention because that test is still coming.
Right folks, so we're off to Red Star Raceway for the next race meeting. Now it's an interesting track. I've never driven it. So it's going to be very new and it's going to be very different for everybody who goes there. There'll be no prior knowledge and you don't go with that muscle memory of how to drive the track. But the trouble with a race weekend is time is so limited. You have 3 15-minute sessions on practice day. It's not long enough for you to properly understand the racetrack and get enough laps in to be proficient. So you really have to go with a plan. You've got to go with things that you want to focus on to sort of tick those boxes, get them out of the way, and then worry about the more complex issues. And the easiest way for me to do that is to prioritize a few corners that I can really work on in the initial session, get them dialed in, and then worry about some of the more complex ones that follow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and have a look for corners that will have a big impact on lap time because they lead onto a long straight. So if this is our start finish here, immediately we're going to prioritize corner number 2, because this is pretty much the longest straight on the circuit and it is going to be critical to get a good apex there. We're going to prioritize corner 3 as well. Now corner 3 does lead into another corner, but just looking at this and given how I feel the Corolla handles, I think that's going to be flat out. I don't think we're going to have to lift or brake for corner 4, so I think a very good exit is going to be important here. Right, looking at the next section, I can tell you it's a complex of corners. And I can have all the theories in the world, but until you've driven that, you won't have a great idea of exactly how to drive it in the best way. Also, the end of the complex exits but into a curve and not a straightaway. For quick wins, it's not going to be the place that I'm going to look. I'm certainly going to look at turn 8 because, again, we are accelerating onto a long straight following it. So exit speed is important. Then we get to another series of curves, and again this whole section of the track is pretty complex, and I wouldn't think it beneficial to have a preconceived plan for that right now. I will again figure that out on the day. But that leaves me with a couple of other exits onto straights, and that would be over here, and it would be the final corner leading into the start finish. In fact, this is going to be one of the most important corners, but I can tell you just from looking at this, turn 2 is going to be super important, and the turn onto the start finish is going to be super important.
Folks, thanks for making it this far. Genuinely, I appreciate the support. I'm so looking forward to the 18th. It's such a big adventure. We'll do a complete review video of that. Mercifully, I won't bore you with any more diagrams. We'll have a lot of onboard footage to show you. We're going to find out if I'm talking absolute rubbish, or perhaps the theory might deliver us a result. I look forward to catching up with you again. But better still, why not just get down to the racetrack, man? Red Star, I understand it's in the Dalmas area, never been there myself, but if you're there, pop in, say hi. And listen, one final request. If any of you have ever driven this track in the anti-clockwise direction, please leave me something in the comments. Tell me what to look out for. Info's hard to come by. Help a brother out, man. Thanks for watching.